Hi, good night, everyone. This is our welcome to the Leadership Institute, and this is our second module working in groups, and we're happy to have Miss Kaygianna from St. Lucia facilitating this session. We'll go straight over to you, Kaygianna. I'll ask you to start your presentation now.
Thank you, Nadine, and good night, participants. It is definitely a pleasure to be here and to be the facilitator presenting on this topic, working with groups. So I will go right into the presentation, working with fisherfolk groups. So first of all, I'm going to define what is a group. So a group is a community consisting of one or more individuals who interact with each other in order to accomplish a certain goal. And so, of course, when we look at fisherfolk groups, we look at groups of fisherfolk or persons with an interest in the industry coming together because there is a common goal or a common interest. And in that case, the interest would be something related to the fisheries sector, whether it is in harvest, whether it is in processing, whether it is in purchase of input, whatever the case may be. So even amongst us, we are part of different fisher groups, and there are different types of fisher groups. So if you can see from on the screen, we have fisher cooperatives, we have fisher associations, we have fishing partnerships, we have joint ownership. And there are slight variations in terms of what each of these are, and the differences is based on the structures, the processes involved in forming of these groups, how these groups are regulated. These would form the basis of the difference between a cooperative or an association. So for example, if a cooperative, for example, which is the type that I am more familiar with, because the cooperative that I work with is the fisherfolk group that I work with is a cooperative, and all of those that exist in St. Lucia are cooperatives. So I am more comfortable and more familiar with that type of grouping. In the cooperative, you have democracy. Every member has a vote, as compared to, say, an association or partnership where it's probably based on your number of shares, what your input is. In a cooperative, there is one vote per member. Every member has the same right, for example. Leadership of these organizations, depending on the type, may be different. So some of them, for example, it's run and the policy body is a board of directors. In other cases, it may be the shareholder, the partners, for example, who are the ones who are responsible for the decision making. So these are the little things that differentiate one type of fisherfolk group from another type of fisherfolk group. And it's important as well to recognize the fact that a fisherfolk group, like any other group, can either be formal or informal. We have groups that are registered, for example, with a regulatory body, and we have some that are not so formal, but they still operate to achieve the goal and the common interest that the individuals have come together to achieve. How do groups originate? Why do people come together to form groups? It may be because an issue has been raised, that persons have come to the realization that it is better to come together to solve the issue presented. So in the case of a fisherfolk group, for example, a group of fisherfolk might decide to come together because there is an issue that is threatening their livelihood. So you might have an example where a marketing agency exists and it's let's say a state-owned, or the fisher cooperative or the fisher folk group, a few fishers are the ones operating that marketing entity. But a private entity now comes into the economic space. And so the fishers now realize, in order for them to be able to survive and compete and protect their livelihood, then it means they need to come together. And that is what we refer to as strength in unity. It may be because a landing site is going to be privatized. The government has decided to give away a landing site that the fisher folk use. And they realize that individually, there may be issues, but if they come together, again, strength in numbers, competition from markets, IUU foreign fishing, and a host of other issues may be the reasons why a group of fishers are going to come together and form this grouping, because they want to ensure that they deal with a particular issue that's best dealt with numbers, with coming together, with being able to sit down and generate the ideas necessary to determine how do we solve these issues. It may be benefit driven. So again, they realize that if we come together, there are particular benefits that can be derived from coming together that we will not be able to achieve if we are alone and if we are operating as individuals. So that would be a reason why they would decide to come together. And we have some examples here for collective purchase and marketing. And in the case of many of our fisher groupings within the Cnfo, that is one of the things that happen. The group has come together, the fisher folk group is formed, and that grouping now is responsible for the purchasing of input in bulk to sell back or to supply the members with it. In the case of St. Lucia, for example, we have the individual, we have 9 individual fisher cooperatives, and we have an umbrella body known as St. Lucia Fisher Folk Cooperative. And St. Lucia Fisher Folk now is responsible for joint procurement. So of course, when all of the cooperatives come together, we put together a large order, and we order out of Atlantic and Gulf for mustard in Miami. We are able to take advantage of economies of scale because we've come together to purchase. Social and cultural benefits, bargaining power and representation. And these two are very vital, a role for fisher cooperatives to play, for fisher, sorry, I keep saying cooperatives, fisher groups to play, bargaining power and representation, because again, there is strength in number. So we recognize if it's just me as an individual fisher trying to say to the government that, look here, the taxes are too high. We need items that are VAT exempt or zero rated in order for the industry to thrive. But the government is not listening to me because I am this one little person, a drop in a bucket of water. But if we come together, then we can lobby, we can agitate, and we have a greater bargaining power, and we have greater representation because we can now come together and organize ourselves. And so this to the right of the screen, we have teams. Together, everyone achieves more. We go on then to look at the dynamics of group development. Groups begin somewhere. They begin somewhere. Again, earlier we looked at why do people come together? So they come together for a reason. It means that they start, groups begin somewhere. And so as groups develop from inception and as time goes by, the dynamics of groups change. And it is the ever-changing dynamics that determine whether group goes from point A to point B, whether it survives, whether it grows, whether it gets dismantled. It is the dynamics within that grouping and how these dynamics are managed that determines how that group moves from one stage to the next. Dynamics looks at the effects of the roles, the behaviors of the individuals within the group. It looks at how one group member works with or vis-a-vis the other group members. Dynamics also looks at impact, motivation, development, stability. Group dynamics affect all of these things within a group. It looks at the energy, the personalities of the people who form the group. What kind of ideas are they generating? It looks at the structure of the group. It looks at the processes and the functions of the individuals in the group. And so there are quite a number of development or dynamic theories within that when you look at group development and group formation and so on. And the one we have on the screen here is Tuckman's group development stages. And like I said, there are quite a number of other theories. George Homan, there is a theory of social exchange and so on. And Tuckman's theory dates way back to the 1960s. And when you go through the different stages of the dynamics, one of the things that is important to understand, and perhaps one of the things that a lot of us, when we form groups, we take for granted, is the fact that when a group is newly established, it will not perform at its maximum at the beginning. Again, it has to do with the dynamics of change that happen at different levels, at different stages of the development of the group. So sometimes we start a group and things do not necessarily go the way we assume or want it to go. And when that happens, then sometimes we drop and we leave and we start to dismantle even before it's even started. But when we look at a little deeper into Tuckman's group development stages, we will well understand why at the beginning it does not always go how we intend it to go. So we are going to just go through the different stages according to Tuckman's theory very briefly. So you have the forming stage. In the forming stage is when we start coming together. We realize there is a problem. We realize that there is an issue that needs to be solved, and we sit around informally and we say, you know what, let's come together. Let's form a grouping. Let's discuss our ideas. So we are forming. In that stage, there tends to be a lot of confusion. There tends to be a lot of uncertainty because everybody is looking towards the other person within the group to determine a lot of things. Who will lead the charge? Who's going to take on that role? Who's going to do this? Are we going to survive? And so there is a lot of confusion and uncertainty. At this stage, this is where we're learning our purpose. This is where we're learning what rules will govern our behavior. This is where we start to develop trust with the other group members. This is where sometimes it's very unclear about who will play what role, who will be the secretary, who's going to be the president, who's going to manage the money, who's going to take care of the day-to-day operations. All of these questions are those that come up at that stage. And this is the stage where you now start to see leaders start to emerge. Because as we start to have the confusion and the uncertainty, somebody or some persons will emerge and say, you know what, I think we should do it that way. Somebody will give the ideas. And so things now start to happen. So after we've decided that and we've learned each other's personalities a bit, and we've learned how to work around each other and how to mesh with each other, we now go to the next stage of development, which is storming. And again, the name is very important here, storming. That is where now there might be a power struggle. Because remember, we said in this first stage, leaders start to emerge. So now you have many persons who seem to be leaders, who seem to have leadership qualities. And so that may become the challenge now, where goals are being challenged. There is a power struggle. We're fighting to be cohesive, and we're trying to determine now how to solve these new conflicts that have arisen. So sometimes now the focus moves from the whole reason why we felt it was necessary to come together, because we're now having conflict about who's gonna lead, who's gonna take the charge, who's best fitting. Like I said earlier, every stage of group development prepares us for the next stage. And so If we do not drop and fall at the storming stage, we now move to the next stage, which is the norming stage, where now we start recognizing individual differences in the persons within the group. So now we start to determine, okay, I have been with them a little while. We can now start to pinpoint more specific roles for each person based on their strengths, based on what they bring to the table. Now we're gonna start thinking of sharing the expectations. So it's no longer about us fighting to determine the who, it's now us recognizing that expectations have to be shared. We now start to become a little more cohesive. We now start to identify ourselves. So identity is being developed, and now we start dividing responsibility. So now there is division of responsibility happening at that stage. So at that stage now, when division of responsibility starts to happen, we now go back to remember what is the purpose on which we were formed. And now, because we now determine this is the purpose, if it was to lobby to the government, we've now determined that this is the spokesperson. And so this is your responsibility. But I'm the person who can do the write-up. And so I am going to write the media release. And so things start moving along. And now that we've established that now, we begin to perform. Now we see a level of greater maturity. Now there will still be conflict, and there will still be conflict all throughout the stages. There will be conflict, albeit conflicts for different reasons, but there will be conflict. And importantly here, we need to recognize that conflict is not necessarily bad. It is how we manage the conflict to help us grow and to help us develop and to help us keep the group together, keep the goal in mind and the purpose in which we form the group in the first place. This is what will help us deal with and manage the conflict. So now we start to become more decision-oriented, and our decisions now are based on the goals and the purpose upon which we form the group in the first place, rather than with emotions. There is a fifth stage, not on the screen, which in the life of a group, it may or may not happen, and it may happen for different purposes. Again, it may be because of the type of group, and that is the adjourning stage. Now, the adjourning stage would be more prevalent in groups who come together for project-based activities. So after you've completed the project, because a project has a start and an end date, after you've completed the project, then the group sometimes dismantles until perhaps the next project, which may be now formed with a different set of people, but usually you adjourn at that point. The other types of adjournment that can happen is when an individual, for example, leaves the group for whatever reason. They've moved on to another country, they've moved on to another group, they've outlived, maybe there is conflict and discord and they've left. The adjourning stage would come in here. So the adjourning stage is really when the group disbands. And again, like I indicated, there are different groups may or may not adjourn at different points, because it would depend on how permanent the group is. And in cases where the groups are permanent, sometimes it may be an individual who leaves while the group itself, the core group itself, or the institution remains. Are we doing okay for now? Can I continue? Is anybody hearing me?
Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
you can continue.
Okay, all right, thanks. Okay, so we move to the other subtopic here, which is leadership. And if you realize what I was going through the previous slide, looking at the stages of group dynamics, I made reference to the term leadership a lot. And so it impresses upon us the importance of leadership in the development of and sustainability of groups. Leadership really is the process of a process of social influence that will maximize, or it exists to maximize the efforts of others towards goal attainment. So in a group, we have individuals in a group, and the role of the leader is to bring out the best in each individual member of the group so that each member can give of their best in order to achieve the goal. Some books, some scholars define leadership as the ability to otherwise get somebody to, the ability to get somebody to do something that they would not otherwise do. Some books define leadership that way, and I actually love this definition. A leader in a group is really responsible to set the pace of the group, to assign roles, to manage the work, to provide structure, especially at the forming stage, to help with conflict resolution, especially at the storming stage. So leadership is very important in group dynamics. The leader sometimes is the one who's responsible to assess the performance of the group and decide, do we need to pull back? Do we need to change something? Are we doing well? Are we on target? Are we on course? Are we being cost effective? Do we need to reduce costs? Do we need to increase in income? The leader normally oversees these things and has ultimate responsibility, even when other persons are responsible for it. So you might have a group, let's say a cooperative or a joint partnership, where you may have a manager, for example, and you have an accounting person, you have a marketing person, but the manager, who is the overall leader here, would have ultimate responsibility for the success of the group by virtue of them overseeing these individual managers or individual roles. The leader usually plays the role of a participant observer. So the leader participates in whatever is happening within the group, but also needs to observe. And in observing, the leader then gets insights as to where change needs to happen. Is that person perhaps not performing well in that role? And is there a need to put the person in another role or try out the person with in another section so that you bring out the best in that person and allow them to achieve and to do their best in performing the role? Leadership is about participating and observing. And then we see here the third bullet point: there is no such thing as a leaderless group, but new leaders will evolve as the group develops. And this is something that sometimes creates a lot of friction in groups, because sometimes people within a group or people outside of the group looking in does not always understand why is it that, okay, this person was the leader, but now I'm seeing this person. But a well-formulated group with a good leader will ensure that there are always persons within the group who are developed in such a way that they are able to take on the mantle, and there is a level of continuity. So a good leader will not stifle the other members of their group. They will in fact encourage them and give them the tools that are required to develop them, to develop their skills, so that they too can take on the mantle of leadership, whether is alongside the current leader, in the absence of the leader, or prepare them for the future. Leadership gives a sense of unity and cohesiveness in a group. And I mentioned that when we're looking at the stages. A leader will encourage members to reflect on how they work with each other and allow the group, give the group the power that they need to go out there and do what is required to ensure that the group serves the purpose for which it was formed initially. Sorry. So importantly, we need to look at how are groups sustained, how to keep it all together, how to create a level of cohesiveness. And again, I refer back to the slide on group dynamics. And I indicated that if we do not manage the groups properly, then sometimes they fall along the wayside. And even before we start, sometimes the groups dismantle. And it is because it's not magic, but it takes effort, it takes time, it takes a skill to keep a group together. Most of us are parents, and so we can well appreciate, we hear it so often that you have a classroom, a teacher is in a classroom, the leader in a classroom, and that teacher has, let's say, 30 students, 30 students who are coming from 30 different households. So 30 students who were socialized differently, who were raised differently, who have different beliefs and different norms and different value systems. And all of these students are now in a classroom with a teacher who has to deliver that same syllabus to that child. You have children who have different learning disabilities or different learning abilities, but yet still you have to manage them. And so a group, a fisher folk group, a fisher group is no different from this classroom setting. You have persons who have different educational attainment. You have persons who have different cultural backgrounds. You have persons who may have served at leadership levels before. You have persons who are green. You have persons who may know a lot about the fishing industry. For example, you may have a group that is made up of persons who actually actively fish. And then you may have a group of persons like me who have never gone out on a fishing vessel, who knows management. But the important thing is that all of us are coming together. And in order for us to remain together, there has to be a level of cohesiveness. And there are particular things that has to be done in order for us to achieve that. So for example, one of the things that will sustain the groups is looking at the successes of the group and the benefits of the group. So we always come back together at the end of the day. We determine at what point we do the assessments, at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, at the end of the financial year. We have to come together to determine, were we successful in achieving our goals? Were we successful in achieving the benefits that we sought out to achieve? Remember earlier we said sometimes we form groups. Two of the reasons why we come together is one, to solve an issue, or two, because we realize that there is a benefit of coming together. So did we achieve that benefit? Did we really get the economies of scale that we wanted by doing joint procurement? Did we achieve it fully? Did we achieve it partially? Was it incremental achievement? And these are the kinds of things that keep us incensed and keep us wanting to remain. And so obviously, we may come at the end of the year and realize that it was a total waste of time that year that we spent together as a group. We did not achieve anything at all. And the purpose for which we formed no longer even exists. And so we recognize, you know what, the best thing is to adjourn and dismantle, because there is no reason for us to be together anymore. Or you may realize, yes, we achieved some level of success and we want to achieve more success. So that keeps us going and keeps the momentum going. One of those that are very, very important is good governance. And many of us here have been on many forums with each other before. And the issue of governance, but most importantly, the need for good governance within these groups have come into question at some point or the other. And so good governance, to me, is one of the pillars that are so very important in ensuring that a group stays together. When you start sitting around a table and you start speaking of theft and malfeasance and corruption and mistrust and distrust and all of these things, people generally do not want to remain in environments that have that sort of thing surrounding it. Generally, people do not want to remain within a group that is known for that type of behavior, or with individuals within a group who tend to be that way, who tend to be dishonest, who tends to be bullies, who tends to be disrespectful. So good governance is one of the things that sustain groups and keep groups together. Transparency is important for good governance. Accountability is important for good governance. And these are the types of things that keep groups together, but also attract new people to the group. Because again, if we're sustaining, we need to bring new people in, because eventually somebody will go out, somebody will leave, somebody will pass away, somebody will move on. You have to always keep bringing new people in. And people are not interested or will not be enticed to come and join a group where there is bad governance, finger pointing, name calling. We do not know where the money went. We do not know what the money was used for. The president or the manager, the leader is doing things on his or her own. The manager does not, the board doesn't know what the manager is doing. The treasurer is signing checks on his own. No, these things push people apart rather than bring people together. It's important to focus. And in focusing, we always go back to the root cause or the root problem, the thing that brought us together in the first instant, the vision, the mission. And for us to remain focused, there is a constant need to monitor, evaluate, change things about. So adaptive management is important there. Sometimes we need to wheel and come again, like the phrase says, or we need to regroup. We need to come together, monitor, evaluate, and determine, are we going along the right track? Do we need to retrack? Do we need to take a side road? Do we need to put in more resources? Do we need to change the manager? Do we need to change the processes or the structures? Focus. Communication is important. And again, I mentioned communication briefly when I looked at governance. Communication is one of the things that are important for good governance, because as members of a group, we need to know what each other are doing. We need to know what the group is doing. We need to know whether we are gaining successes, whether we are seeing losses. We need to be able to come together and talk, just like we did in the beginning, that we were able to come together and determine there is a problem. We need to come together to solve it. We need to continue to communicate. We need to continue to share ideas. We need to continue to brainstorm so that we can continue to stay together and we can continue to regroup. And one of the things that are very important is a central and accessible space. There needs to be somewhere that we call home, somewhere that we can meet. So for example, in order to foster good governance, in order to be able to have a place and a structure to monitor and evaluate, in order for us to effectively communicate, we may have a central office. And so surrounding the central office then becomes the organ of the organization, a place where the members can come to get information, a place where the members can come to lodge the complaints, and a place from which communication can be sent out as well. And so these things, these pillars are very important in order for us to sustain groups. And like I indicated in the beginning, we have different types of group that fall under the Cnfo umbrella. We have different types of fisher organizations. Our structure in terms of an organization, in terms of a group, may not be, it's not rigid. It really depends on what we're trying to achieve, what perhaps has worked in our country culturally, socially, what are the requirements in our own individual countries, and so on. These would determine what type of group you form, how many persons sit on your board, whether you have a board of directors, who is overall responsible for the group, what your hierarchical structure looks like. All of these things will be specific to the type of group that you form. But apart from that, the general philosophy of groups and the general pillars and characteristics of groups generally remain the same across the board, no matter what type of group that you form. So I think I've come to the end of my presentation. And so I open the floor for questions. But I think before we go into specific questions, one of the areas I want to perhaps first to just look at briefly and is in terms of the different groups that we have, the different types of groups. I know, like I said, amongst us, I know we have cooperatives, we have associations. I'm not sure whether we have partnerships or joint ventures, but perhaps we can just hear from persons in these different groupings as to perhaps why the type of group that they formed was the one that was best fitting for them. So the floor is open. Anybody wants to share with us?
Yes, I will share. Good night,
Thanks,
everyone.
Winsbert. Good night.
And how are you? Yeah. Well, let me
I
first
am
say
good.
very excellent presentation. I like how you go through the 4 topics, but one thing I noticed with majority with the 4 topics that you highlight with groups. Before I go into the why I join my group is that why I find that we have good farming group, but at the end of the times we don't have good performing group. And I think that is where the struggle is right now in terms of yes, we could pull a good set of persons together and form a cooperative, a joint venture, whatever, but in the long run, we don't really have the performance and the play out of everybody. Because since I get involved in fishing cooperative, is that I saw opportunity as a young fisher and to be a voice of the fisher folks because there are some fishers who have the ability to do walks in some organization, but there are certain people who might not have the ability to speak. So this is I find in amongst our groups as well because they have some good persons, do some good resource, some good background check, but they cannot be the voice, and that is how I fit myself in sometimes. But I think being in a part of the fishing cooperative, it helped in terms of strengthening the capacity of the fisher folks organizations, in terms of accessing certain things as an individual. Because when you're an individual, there are certain things you might not get done. You might open up to certain training because when you're in the fishing cooperative, some training do come free. And when you're individual, you have to pay for some of these opportunities you do get from fishing cooperative is a very a plus. Even when you become a member of a fishing organization or fishing cooperative, you do get tangible benefit from a cooperative. I do afraid from my experience looking at a joint venture, I think it do looking good to me. I don't know how other people think, but I scared it because sometimes they get totally bid out according to who you're joining up with. But in closing, I would like to say is that we have very good, brilliant ideas in terms of the farming a group. But when come to the performance, I think it still belong to one individual have to play the role. And I think in Fisher Folks Cooperative as well too, is that how the organization is set up as a non-profit organization. I think it bring a reluctancy and certain members who really fit in because I find that when you have an interim board, it just function sometime and I feel it does function than when you have a elected board. Because when they have persons elected now, I think some of them when they know their roles, I think they just shy away from their roles and the commitment don't really did it. But I think very good presentation, but I can leave others to just come in and say what they have to say. But that's just my intervention.
Hello, good night.
Thank you, Winsbert. Yes, Sandra.
Kaygianna. Hi, good
Kaygianna,
evening.
yes.
Really appreciate that presentation.
Thanks.
It's clear that you have a lot of experience working with fisher folk organizations within your country. I appreciate this topic because I am struggling after working so many years across the region, I have seen, just like Winsberg said, they form and they fall apart. There's nothing sustaining them in the long term. And you need these organizations for the long haul in order to respond to fisheries management issues and what the government is saying and what the government is doing. You need a unified body in order to respond and to participate in fisheries management within each of the countries. And I'm going to give you the Belize experience. Is when we did our survey, we found that only 10% of the fishing population were members of any group, right? And when we asked, why aren't you members of a group? And people are just not willing to participate in groups, and not even to mention the youths, like how do you get them to participate in these groups? So I am just trying to get some feedback from you guys. What is preventing people, fishers, community members, from forming these groups? I know that there are difficulties. I mean, Kaygianna went through the different stages, but it doesn't seem that we are able to get beyond the second phase, right? Because personalities always seem to get into it and quarrel, and money get lost, money missing, this, that, quarrel. So the question is, how do you really form these organizations and sustain them, especially if it is not a cooperative where you are making money and that is your success and that's your benefits? What happens when the benefits are social benefits? How do you keep these organizations going? Thanks.
So I'm gonna ask that it may be, although you spoke specifically of, like you said, the Belize experience, but generally the question then is, and I noted quite well that you said at the end there, you said that the benefits may not necessarily be monetary, it may be social benefits. The question then I'm inclined to ask is that what they are looking for? You said that about 10% of the fishers are part of groups, but the social benefits that the groups are able to provide to them, is that what they're looking for? And perhaps that is where we need to start. Is that what they want, and is that what they're looking for? Because to me, the benefits of it would ultimately decide whether they want to join or not. And as much as our situation in St. Lucia is not much different, I do not have a figure to quote, but when I look at my landing site, for example, I'm in Vieux-Fort, and Vieux-Fort is the largest landing site in St. Lucia. We have, maybe Rita can help me here, a couple hundreds of vessels on that landing site, but much less than 50% of these vessel owners are members of the cooperative. But they're right here, they actually access our services, they purchase fuel from us, they purchase tackles from us, but they're not inclined to join the cooperative. And so one of the things I've always thrown out at my board of directors is, what if somebody were to ask you, what is your basket of benefits? What do you say? What are you putting in there for them? What do they want? Whatever you're offering, is it relevant to them now? Like it was 20, 30 years ago. The cooperative is 50 something plus years old. Is it that what you're offering is no longer relevant? How do you determine what is relevant now? Because you have to create something for them that they want. That is what will attract them to you. And so these are some of the questions perhaps we need to ask ourselves. Go back to the drawing board and ask yourself, are your benefits aligned with the needs or the wants of your target audience?
Yes, me again, KJ. I like how you just mention it because in SVG right now, we are looking to do a recruitment drive for all of the primary organization. And that is some of the questions that some of the persons are asking. What is in it for me? Because when they
Right.
really look around, they are seeing not much benefit, socialization, wrong the fishing cooperative and them. And that is why I think it we as we used to we need to come up with a different strategy regionally in how we attract younger and other fishers to the cooperative and them because what I find now you're hardly having persons coming into the cooperative and them. And I think there's a very a struggle right around the region is that we are not attracting new membership. I think our approach need to be different. I think in some cooperative where they give back some rebates, some give back
Dividends, rebates, interest.
dividends and all kind of things. But I think we need to come up with something that I could track the youths because we are not attracting much youths because if you're looking regionally, it's more older people involved in the fishing industry than youths. Because after I did a survey, even in St. Vincent here, I find that you have almost 70% older persons and you just had about 20% youths in fishing and about 5% of females inside of the fishing industry. And we need to see how best we could get more younger persons because one of the things we was looking at too I know is to see how we could get the fisheries division or the government put fishing at the school curriculum so people could be and even highlighted the fishing cooperative and them and get them into the some of the A-level college then encourage them now to be a part of a fishing cooperative where they could have benefit but as the problem is what really have to for more than the rebate what kind of next step we need to think back to you.
Good night.
Thank you for that intervention. I see Vanilla hands
Good
up.
night.
Yes. Um, I would like to add my voice to some of what Winsbert said, and a lot of what he's saying is true. However, on another scale, I think that what is happening with the fishers organizations now is that we have been doing the same thing for so long and just getting the same results. One of the things that we have to think carefully about when we talk about young people is that we have to look first that we are talking about a digital world now, and COVID itself has brought out that this is now going to be a digital world. And there are no young people, especially males, um, who we want to, because the push is to get more males into fishing and that kind of thing. And that we are not going to attract this younger generation of persons of or males into a industry that is structured in the way it is structured at this point in time, that operates in the way that operates. I mean, it is, I don't know how difficult it is, but the fishers themselves or the vessel owners or whoever, they have to first start looking at a more digital approach to fishing so that the guys that holding these devices would have an attraction to using them. Nobody want to be on a boat today operating the same way that they were operating for all these 40, 50 years. And that is one of the keys to getting more attraction into to the fishing industry. Um, in terms of structure, I also think that what we have in this fishing industry, I've had the honor of going a lot of places and visiting different fishing industries, as some of you in this group would have seen. And for most of them, not just us, but for most of them, a lot of them have the same issues that we have, the issues of membership, the issue, almost all the same issues. But the reality is we have a lot of people in this fishing industry who just they don't want to work. They don't want to participate in anything. And no matter how much or what you give them, a lot of persons interested in just what they can get. There are some people who just is not interested in being in organizations. So we have to structure these groups. We have to structure these groups to meet the needs of both persons and not have the type of expectations that we are having right now. We have what they call them, like here in Barbados, for instance, we have an organization, or somebody in this group here from Barbados can help me with this. But for the people 50 and up, then 50 and when they reach 50, I can't remember what you call the group. But the fact of the matter is they have almost over 500 members. They look at what it is that these members, the members join for the benefits, not the work, because they're certain that the amount of people in those groups don't work. They join for the benefits of what the group have, but they do nothing. Renew their cards and reap the benefits. But the persons that managing them, the groups they function. And I think that from what I'm seeing now, especially for the persons in the academic level of this fishing industry, their expectations are they're looking at these fishing industries the same way that they were looking at them. This whole thing about pulling people together and pulling groups together and keeping groups. There's some persons who function quite well informally and get things done. So I mean, to me, it is what works for who. There's still groups. We just got to measure what they do, document how they are. But I think it is this whole idea that we have where we still looking at groups, especially fisher folk groups, in the same way in which we were looking at them way down the road. And things are changing, people are changing, groups are changing, people interest is changing, but people want the same people that you talk about that you are not meeting their needs. If you hear something happening where money is being paid out or something like that, these are the same people that quickly you get them, some of them are even the head ones that quarrel. But these are the people you can't get into a meeting. You can't get to be a part of anything. But once something is being, and when they get what they want, they're gone. So we have to focus on one, membership, and we have to focus on getting rid of the freeloaders, those people who don't want to do anything but want to receive. And you just got to be straight up about it.
Thank you, Vernell. I see Peter's hand up. I think it's been up a little bit. Peter, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. Vanel and the Winds, but Ms. Vanel mostly dealt with most of the issues that I had in mind to raise, and here on Union Island, we have had similar struggles like every other organization, fisher folk organization out there. And the main thing is because of that notion that fishers and farmers are mostly drop out of school, it affects our organization tremendously. And what we have been trying to do here on Union Island and the Southern Grenadines is to try to get fishers, so those who have the experience, to go into the school institution and do little talks, little pep talks with the youth. But because of how the education system is structured and the leadership of the school system, we are not making a breakthrough in that area. Fishing generally is one of the leading financial earning for people in the Grenadines and mainland St. Vincent. But what have been happening is that unless the central government, the policy makers take that initiative and bring into the curriculum the whole aspect of the fishing industry, where we start teaching, creating a subject area for within the curriculum. For example, we have diving, we have snorkeling, we have trawling, we have swimming, and even boat operators, where you can go out there and do fishing tours, do whale watching, do dolphin watching, and all these aspects of things we can tie it into the tourism sector, where we mesh both fishing and tourism, and to get that whole holistic aspect of things together. We in Uniland did a strategic planning system, which through TNC and the Sustainable Grenadines, and we put it out there, and it was a very, very good effort on the whole implementation of that strategy, where we zone areas within the whole Grenadines, from St. Vincent, from Bequidong, and it even extends down to Carriacou and part of Grenada, and we zone the area where we have different operations. For example, pot fishing, seine fishing, net fishing, and all these things, we put it together. But because the policymakers are not putting these things or implement them in the system, so that the whole cohesion of all the players work together and benefit in a way to bring economic benefit to the community, we will continue to have the same problem. Because if the policymakers then put the thing in place and bring the whole system within the education system, we will continue to just struggling, because as we said earlier, fishers only look for what goes into their pockets, and we don't want to make sacrifice to achieve whatever we are achieving, and we do not think, most of us do not think long term. We only think about the immediate, how much we can make and pocket now and have a nice time. Spree, and more spree, and not looking at the long term thing, because we have the hurricane season in our hands, and we do not put measures in place in the event that a hurricane hits us and we lose all our gears and our equipment and our boat. And these are things that we try to put in place, but because the fishers are not working together, they're not seeing that long-term benefit of the whole economic structure, because fishing is a serious business, and a lot of finances are being put into it. And unless we don't have do proper documentation of what we do and keep the records, so at least we can review and work with those records and plan around what we do, we'll continue to be going down the straight that destructive road. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Regis. We are on that 9:30 mark, well, a little past it. And so I'm not sure if there is anybody else who has something very, very pressing that they want to bring to our attention. I'm not sure if Nadine or Mitch has any parting words, but we are trying to bring the curtains to a close on tonight's session.
Very good job, Kaygianna. It has been 1 hour. Mitch has just rejoined the call. I don't know if he wants to say anything, Mitch, since you're here.
I'm good. I mean, I'm just happy that we have young ones that are willing to facilitate, and we thank Kaygianna and Thailand, of course. And we look forward to miss you in the next 2 weeks.
Okay, right. So once again, thank you. And as usual, if it's possible for you to turn on your cameras as we take our final picture, we would appreciate that. So we're going to say good night. I will leave on the recording in case I get some faces. Thanks, Miss Castle, Jamaica. So it has been a very interesting discussion on groups. We had a very good question on how we keep these groups to perform. And actually, while you turn on your camera, it's from an assessment where the findings were that the groups are dormant in a lot of our member states. And one of the reasons, or some of the reasons pointed out were lack of communication, need to improve management skills, leadership skills, and what have you. Hi, Mr. Peter, long time. Really good to see you. Miss Sylvia. Zenobia, where are you from?
She's from St. Lucia. She's part of my cooperative.
I'm from St. Lucia, but
Wonderful. No worry, Miss Rita, and congratulations, Miss Rita. Let's congratulate Miss Rita. She did all 8 modules after completing tonight. So now she, along with Miss Sylvia and 2 persons from last year, we have 4 people who we can say have done a full course on leadership from the Cnfo Leadership Institute. So congrats. All right.
Congrats,
Thanks.
everybody.
Dr.
Thank
Shelia,
you.
good night. Thanks for joining. All right, I need to take the picture, right? I'm chatting.
Hi, Cnfo.
hello.
Kaygianna, Cnfo is my classmate though.
Okay, small world.
We went to school in Sucre together.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So she's one of the newer members of the cooperative. And
Great.
I'm very happy that she decided from early to be part of a program like that.
Nice.
Very important.
Cnfo, welcome on board.
Thank you.
Welcome, welcome, welcome to Nova.
Thanks.
All right, I'll take the last picture and we're all. Thank you again, and we look forward to having you in 2 weeks' time. Miss Susan Hodge from Anguilla will be presenting and facilitating that session. We look forward to it. We have 1 man, 2 women. So for the 4th session, I am asking that someone volunteers to facilitate that. It's going to be the 4th. Yes, we will need somebody. So think about it. Sinovia, Machina, you do any yet? Machina? Oh, who we have? Vernell. Yeah, so we will need someone for 4th to 8 Winsburg. All right, cool, guys. Thanks once again, and we'll see you next time. Same place, same time. Bye.
Thanks, bye. Enjoy, Nadine.
Bye.